Hey guys, welcome to the Keymasters Club coaching call. In this coaching call, we're going to talk about how to plan out your WaaS build. Specifically, we're trying to help you get to the finish line with building your turnkey platform. It's easy to get caught in the weeds as you're going from step to step and getting stuck. And a lot of the students who've been through our Turnkey Websites Blueprint course, they have all the information they need, but there's a lot of steps and a lot of moving pieces, and people are having trouble getting to the finish line and actually getting a finished turnkey website. So the purpose of this coaching call is to help you plan to finish your WaaS, and I'm going to hopefully give you some tools to do that. So first of all, the steps to build your WaaS, websites as a service. Now, we go over these in detail in the Turnkey Websites Blueprint course, but as kind of a general overview, here are the technical steps. Now, of course, in the course, we also talk about choosing a niche, building an audience, marketing, onboarding, support, all of that stuff. But right now, we're just focusing on building the actual platform. So the first step in that is of course, choosing a hosting provider. Now, as I go through these steps, I'm going to talk about some of the stumbling blocks that might prevent you from moving to the next step, and some places where you might get held up or get kind of into the weeds. And I'm going to kind of talk about how you might be able to prevent yourself from getting stuck on that particular step. And then we'll talk more about kind of the mindset around that. But just for the steps, the first thing is choosing a hosting provider. A lot of people want to use their existing hosting provider or want to try some different hosting providers. And I would say stick to the ones that have been proven to be good hosting providers for turnkey websites. Those include WP Engine, GridPane, Closte, C-L-O-S-T-E, Closte. Those three can provide you with all the tools you need to automate your entire turnkey websites process. And then there are other hosts like Cloudways and RunCloud and Server Pilot that are good as well. So any of those I mentioned would be good to start with. If you're familiar with any of those, then that's the one you should choose. If you're already using it, then just stick with it. If you're not using any of those, then I personally recommend WP Engine or any of those other ones that you just take a look at their plans and see what works for you. But as far as what I've used, WP Engine works great. So just pick one that's worked for someone in the past and use it. Don't try to stick with a host that you've used before but isn't one that I just listed, because you'll probably run into problems when you get into the technical details of multi-site and domain mapping and auto SSL and wildcard SSL and all of that stuff. There's some quirks in normal hosts where those things aren't as smooth as if you go with the known hosts that work well with those things. So WP Engine, GridPane, Closte are your go-tos. Cloudways, RunCloud, Server Pilot, WPMU Dev Hosting are good alternatives if you are familiar with those. All right, moving on. Install and configure multi-site. So that's the next step. You just want to make sure on your host, like with WP Engine, it's just when you set up your install, you say, hey, I want this to be multi-site. You also want to configure whether you want multi-site to be subdomain or subfolder. I recommend doing subdomain, but either one works. So if you're getting confused or caught up in that piece, just choose subdomain and move on. And then get that set up. A couple other things, and we go over this in detail in the Turnkey Websites Blueprint course, but you also want to have you want to have wildcard SSL set up. You want to, that's the big one. And then you want to map your primary domain, the domain that's going to be, the main domain for your network, get that mapped and working. And that's kind of what you need to do to install and configure multi-site from the beginning. Yeah, Melanie in the chat says she tried Liquid Web and it doesn't work. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. There are plenty of good WordPress hosts out there that aren't ideal for turnkey websites. So you can go down that rabbit hole and find out maybe your favorite host does work well with turnkey websites, but you might go down that rabbit hole and find out that it doesn't, and then you wasted a bunch of time. Just stick with what has been proven to work, and those are the things I just mentioned previously. The next step is install and configure plugins. So these are not only the plugins that can help you build your platform and maintain your platform, like backup plugins and speed optimization and security plugins, but also the plugins that your users are going to use, like maybe form builder plugins, e-commerce plugins. Though I don't recommend e-commerce, especially if you're building this for the first time. Whatever other plugins you want that your users are going to interact with, you want to install and configure those. But again, we want to think simply, and I'll get more into that actually in another slide, so I'm not going to get into that too much here. Then you can configure and customize your themes. Stick with one theme framework like Astra or Genesis or Divi or whatever theme framework that you like, that you want to use. And then you can provision, multiple templates or multiple sites based on that theme framework, but just stick with one theme framework at first. Next step, set up WP Ultimo or another payment and provisioning plugin, but I recommend WP Ultimo. Get that configured, get your pricing plans set up, and get all of that set up. Get your payment processor connected and all of that stuff. The next step is to customize the dashboard for your clients. So add your branding, simplify, move the menus around, that kind of thing. Then you want to set up your onboarding, which can be videos or emails or a welcome screen in your WordPress dashboard. And then the last thing you want to do is set up your sales page. And that's because all of the choices you make up to this point might change what your core message is going to be on your sales page. So, and plus the sales page is something that people tend to work on first because it's easy for them, that you know how to set up a website. So, and it's more fun and it's exciting because it's about this new thing. But I would ask you to, avoid that temptation and save setting up the sales page for last, because then you have the platform already built, and then you'll be more willing to just get the sales page done and not dwell on it, because that's something where you can get lost in the weeds and you can try to perfect it too much. And instead, just focus on your platform, get that done, and then you can work on the sales page. And then you can get up a quick sales page to start selling it right away, and then you can tweak the sales page forever, right? That's something you can just keep tweaking and perfecting over time. Cool, Melanie. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. You wanted to test it out for the group, the Liquid web hosting. So that's cool. Yeah, I just don't want people to get caught on that part of the process where they're trying a bunch of different hosts and finding, all these hosts don't really work. Cool. So those are the steps. You can use that to kind of build your own checklist where, you just go through each step and check it off the list and make sure you've got it done, and then move on to the next one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the steps. Now here's the meat and potatoes of this coaching call is tips for getting this thing done, right? The steps. It's one thing to know the steps. That's the easy part. It's actually getting the steps done and getting the thing finished. So here's how to do it. The main thing, the mantra is you want to print this out, stick it on your wall, recite it over and over again in your head in the morning. Perfect is the enemy of done. And, this is a phrase I think we've heard before. It's a paraphrase of I think perfect is the enemy of good. And, but in this case, trying to make a perfect WaaS right out of the gate is going to basically prevent us from ever getting it done. So we just want to remember, we want to get it done first, and then we can go back and perfect it later. If you want to get it done, you want to stick to a schedule. So make a deadline for yourself and then map out the weeks that are going to lead up to that deadline and what it's going to take. Make sure you're realistic, right? A realistic deadline is not next week to have your whole thing completed. especially if you're starting from the beginning. In our challenge that we're doing in Keymasters Club, we're setting a 2-week deadline. I'm sorry, not 2-week, 2-month deadline. So we're giving ourselves 2 months to finish building our WASs, and that should be enough time. But it's not enough time to make it perfect. It's only enough time to get it done. So stick to a schedule. 2 months is good. It just depends on what else you have going on, and how much time you have to devote to this project. But you want to make some kind of schedule and stick to it as closely as possible. Find accountability partners. That's what we're doing in Keymasters Club. We are, building an accountability group to help each other get things done and keep each other motivated. It also helps to see what each person is working on and see, what they're able to do and get motivation from that. So that's very helpful. Think MVP. So this goes back to the perfect is the enemy of done, right? Think minimum viable product. What is the minimum amount I need to do to consider this done? To consider it working, to consider it something that I could, have some people try out as beta testers or whatever. Think minimum, everything you're doing, think, is this overkill? Could I do this more simply? Can I do less of this? Whatever you're doing when you're installing plugins, when you're, installing themes, when you're configuring things, when you're styling things, when you're setting things up, just keep thinking to yourself, is this the minimum effort that I could be doing, or could I be simplifying this even more? And finally, as you're building, use a phased approach when you're thinking about the minimum viable product. So what that means is you're going to launch in phase 1. Phase 1 is the absolute minimum needed for launch, but then you're going to start shuffling things over to your phase 2 list. Phase 2 is the nice to haves and other fun stuff to make your WaaS really shine. So these are the bells and whistles that you're going to add later on. Phase 1 is your launch phase. This is what you need to launch the product. Absolute minimum. Phase 2 is maybe 6 months down the line, after you've kind of learned what your customers want. Because that's another thing, right? Your customers might tell you that they don't want the thing that you thought they wanted. So you might not even need to add the extra bells and whistles that you thought you wanted to add, because your customers just don't need it, or they're happy with what they have, or you can send them a poll and say, hey, which of these 3 or 5 things do you want us to work on? And they might only pick one of them, and the other 2 they're not really interested in. And you don't truly know that until you have people on your platform using it as paying customers. Once you have that, then you can start to work on your phase 2 and give them what they want. So here's an example of a phased approach. So when we're thinking of those steps that I talked about earlier, we want to tackle them in phases. So phase 1 is for launch, and phase 2 is for perfection, or the next step. So your version 2.0 basically. So like, for example, the step of installing and configuring your plugins, phase 1 is install only the plugins that you're already familiar with, because you should be building your turnkey platform for a type of customer that you've worked with in the past and that you've built a website for in the past. So you should have, a handful of plugins that you know about, that you like to use, that works well. Install those, configure those. You can see if they work well or fit your needs for multi-site. And then stick with those. Then in phase 2, that's when you can spend the time to experiment with some different alternatives or some other plugins, some extra added functionality that you think they might need, and then you can add those in later. And that's actually even works out to be a cool kind of bonus for your customers. You can be like, hey, customers, here's all these new cool features I'm adding. You don't want to throw in all your features at the very beginning. You want to roll out your features in phases so that your customers can feel like you're still iterating and you're still adding new features. This is a mistake I made when I first launched Tech Site Builder. I kind of put everything in it that I wanted, and then after I launched it, it kind of just stagnated because I didn't have anything to add. And so, you know, people would think, hey, he just kind of abandoned this project, you know, what's going on? So it's cool to have some things, to keep some things close to your chest, or keep them things on the side, and hold those off until phase 2 or phase 3 or phase 4 or whatever that you can roll out further down the line. You don't need every functionality under the sun in your first phase. Just give them the basics. So like a next step, you know, configure and customize themes. So for that, you know, a lot of people want to, you know, throw 12 themes at their customers from the very beginning. That's a lot of work that's going to prevent you from launching. So instead, you know, implement 1 to 3 templates using a pre-built theme, like a starter theme, like one of Astra starter sites, or a Genesis child theme, or, you know, a fleshed out theme that you can just go in and add, you know, starter content and stock photos, and kind of clean it up a little bit, but you don't have to work too hard to get those templates set up. Then later on down the line in phase 2, you can add more templates, more customized templates, stuff like that. And again, your users are going to love that, because they're going to see, oh, you know, hey, every now and then I'm getting new themes that I can try out or test out. So that's really cool. So, so that's what you can do with your themes. So phase 1, just implement 1 to 3. You know, with Tech Site Builder, we only implemented 1. With the new version I'm rolling out, it's just going to be 3, but they're all going to have the same content. It's really just the design that's different. And then phase 2, add more templates or build your own. All right, and another step in the process is customizing your WordPress dashboard. So phase 1, it could just be a matter of simplifying the dashboard, rearranging the menu. You know, we talk about that in the course, where you want to kind of remove some of the extraneous things in the menu. And of course, we have the UI Manager plugin that we've created to do that very simply and easily for you. But that's really all you need, is just, you know, simplify the dashboard for your customers, and then maybe you can, you know, tweak some of the styling to add your colors and your logo and stuff like that. But really keep it simple phase 1. Then phase 2, you can fully brand, restyle the dashboard. You could theme it, do whatever you want with it. You could, and that's where you can kind of experiment or play around with some different options for that. But to save time, just simplify the menu and get it out. Another step is setting up onboarding. So, you know, this is where you can create different ways to onboard your customers. For phase 1, just record your screen as you set up a demo site. So that's very, you know, simple. It's just one video where you are walking through setting up the site yourself. You say, okay, and you talk through it, right? So you're saying, okay, I've just signed up. Here's the dashboard. I'm going to click on, you know, the customizer and go in and add in my logo and change the colors. And then I'm going to go to my pages, and I'm going to edit the about page and add in my own content. I'm going to swap out these photos. I'm going to go in and add some widgets to my sidebar, so on and so forth, right? And then just, you know, as long as it takes, it could be 30 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be 15 minutes, just walk through it. Don't worry about being perfect. Don't worry about being slick. Just get it done. Then you can, you know, maybe throw on an intro animation or something like that and call it a day. And then throw that in your dashboard. That will be your initial onboarding video until you can do a more slick step-by-step production, like we talk about in the Turnkey Websites Blueprint course. And then you can create, you know, those walkthrough videos, the email sequences, all of that stuff. But you don't need that at the beginning. You can simply do a walkthrough video, and that should suffice for your first few customers until you can. And again, you can start to see where your customers run into roadblocks, where they're asking questions, and then you can answer those questions in your phase 2 onboarding videos. So again, just want to get something out there quickly, and then you can go to phase 2 and perfect and make it slick, add the email sequences, add, you know, some kind of, you know, wizard in the dashboard and all that stuff. You can save that for phase 2. So this is an example of how, you know, there might be things that you want to do, but you don't necessarily need to do them for a minimum viable product phase 1 approach. You can instead save those things for your next phase, a phase 2. So that's it. That's basically what I wanted to talk about in this coaching call, is to talk through the steps you need to go through, get you in the right mindset of, you know, doesn't have to be perfect. Get an accountability group, even if it's not through KeyMaster'S Club. Just maybe find some other people who are working on their turnkey platforms and say, hey, do you want to start an accountability group? Great. And then you can do that. And then, you know, get a phased approach to where your minimum viable product is phase 1, and then phase 2 can be a more fleshed out version. And then you can continue to perfect and add new functionality in phase 3 and beyond. So hopefully that helps you guys get some more structure around your turnkey website building and your projects. I'm going to open it up to questions now. If you guys have any questions about any of this, let me know.